Hello, so today we're going to be doing a tier list. That's right, by popular demand, we're going to do another tier list for set 15. This time it's going to be me going through the items and explaining the items that are the craftable ones you can make, how they interact with different units, and how I kind of perceive them in terms of when I'm thinking about slamming items or making items or playing around certain components. If you like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe. Tier lists are more for fun content and are usually contextual or situational, but I do a couple because people like them. I did ranking the augments before. Now we're going through items. Eventually we'll work through like radiant items and some of the other more niche things, but this channel is mostly guide style content, going through patches, going through good comms, as well as going through different facets of the game. Recently, Orn Artifact Guide, I put a lot of work into it, so check it out if you want. Additionally, if you're liking Orn Artifacts and items and stuff like that, and you want to see gameplay, Svenrubik Gaming VOD. Today's going to be a Silvermere Dawn Jace game, so make sure to check that out if you want to see Silvermere Dawn Jace in action. Now, let's go through the items. So, in general, I'll probably open up a team builder just so I can talk about some examples here. When I'm thinking about S tier to D tier items, a lot of times I'm looking at them in terms of how I rank them and how often I slam the item and how applicable it is to multiple scenarios or multiple situations within the current landscape of the set. So sometimes items can like be really good on a unit, they can be really bad on a unit. A lot of times it can change per patch, but a lot of times I'm thinking mostly about the item and how punishing it is to use those components in a certain way. That's just like as a little preface of how I kind of rank and look at these situations, excuse me. So let's start with Rabadons. Rabadons, I think it's a little bit of a weird item. Rabadons is kind of like a high roll item. It's not an item that I'm often making, but it gives a lot of value. Basically, Rabadons gives you a bunch of AP and a bunch of damage amp. So if you want a unit that wants a bunch of AP and a bunch of damage amp, Rabadons could be a really strong item. A lot of times when items use two of the same components, those are what I would call more high roll kind of items. And a lot of times it's a little bit awkward with those types of items because you're less likely to get multiple of the same components when you're playing a game of TFT. So very rarely do you want to make a Rabadons, because if you're playing around an AP comp, you would want to probably use those two rods to make two different AP items for your AP carry. However, in certain situations and on a lot of units, right, like Yumi, a lot of units that scale well with AP, if they're not a Sork unit that gets a lot of AP for free, it's a pretty good item. So I'm going to put it in that A tier slot. Next we have Infinity Edge. Infinity Edge is kind of weird. I'm going to also put it in A tier. I think S tier are like the items that I slam instantly no matter what. Infinity Edge is really good, don't get me wrong, but there are some AD carries that aren't that great with it. Infinity Edge is great on a lot of the reroll AD carries, but one of the big problems is that it's not very good on Ashe. So I don't think it's like S tier. Obviously, it's a way of making your ult crit, and it kind of scales you really well into a lot of the fights, and it's just like really nice. It can work on pretty much all the AD carries in a lot of cases. It's usually an item that you're pretty happy to make a lot of the time, but because like there's certain like units that sometimes are a little bit awkward with it. The other thing with Infinity Edge that doesn't make it like an instant S to me, and it's more of like an A tier, is that like there's a lot of fruits that give you crit. So sometimes I feel like I'm in a little bit of an awkward spot. Either augment or fruit kind of gives me crit, and then I already slammed Infinity Edge. It doesn't feel as good in those situations. But that is to say, really good item, good use of components, great way to scale your damage. I think it's a definite A tier. It's like solid. Most AD carries like it. You're good to go. Protector's Vow. Now, Protector's Vow, I think is one of the few items that kind of have like this archaic element to them where you have like starting mana, right? Starting mana is something they removed from the game for pretty much all cases except for Protector's Vow. Protector's Vow is a great use of components. If you're not playing AP, or even if you are playing around certain AP lines, it's just an amazing tank item in my opinion. It helps units cast their ult really well, and I think it's a really good use of the components because Chainmail is often an item that feels a little bit dead unless you're playing in like an AD predominant lobby where you need the Chainmail to make certain items. Tier is also a little bit awkward to play around sometimes, but now they also added mana gen. Mana regen as a stat. So Protector's Vow gives you mana regen because it's made with a tier, but then it also gives you that starting mana. Then it also has this lifeline effect where you get a huge health shield. So a lot of frontline units actually really like Protector's Vow because if they're a unit that likes to cast a lot, it helps them to cast. Think like your Jarvans that has a stun that can sway the fight. Think your Brahms that has a stun that can sway the fight. But even with other units, it also has a lot of value in terms of just giving mixed resistances and giving you a big chunky ass health shield. The health shield also works really well because there's actually traits that scale off of it. Stuff like Protectors where they get durability with shield. So that applies with the Protectors as well. I think it's just an S tier. I usually like, if I'm, the only time I wouldn't slam protectors is if I'm making, or if I need the tier to play around, like a backline mana gen item. But other than that, I think it's like solid in that S tier. I'm pretty happy with it this set to just make it in general. Anima Visualize used to be a really shit item. I actually think it's really good now. For a frontline item, it gives like durability, HP, but now it gives 2 mana regen, which is actually pretty massive, and it has like a self-sustaining effect. I think it's pretty good as a frontline item. I'm actually pretty happy to make it, and a lot of units or builds that I go for usually use this as like one of the HP related items that I would make. Guinsoo I think is also in A tier. A lot of scaling auto attackers love Guinsoo. They changed Guinsoo last set, that now it gives you stacking attack speed every second instead of it being scaling off autos. They turned that into like an artifact called Flicker Blade. What makes Guinsoo really great is that you can actually put on a lot of different units because it will slowly ramp up attack speed no matter what. We've seen lots of AP builds as well make use of Guinsoo a lot more. If you want to chain cast, it's like the way to go, just because the ramping attack speed, at one point you'll just make it to a point where you're like doing insane amounts of bursting damage and stuff like that. I think it's also a great way to use components. Like if you get stuck with the raw and you're playing more towards AD, it's a great way of like killing or getting rid of a bad component. So I think it just falls in that A tier. It's something that I'm like often making in a lot of my games, and I think it works very flexibly amongst multiple different units, which I think is a big plus, which is what A tier kind of goes with. Spark is, I'm gonna put Spark in B tier. When you're making basically Spark, it's like a pseudo tank item. I say that because it gives you tank stats, obviously, right? It's like made to be a frontline item, but it doesn't really give you tankiness, right? Majority of its effect is either in the form of doing extra damage or doing utility, which is shredding. So this reduces magic resist. The problem is that there's a way better item if you want to reduce magic resist. So a lot of times when you're making Spark, it's because you don't have an option of making the other item, which will come up later in the tier list. But typically speaking, Spark is a little bit awkward because when you put it on a tank, it's not going to help contribute to their tankiness. So it feels a bit bleh, right? It feels a bit like it doesn't have that that you want with like a tank item. So a lot of times when you make these type of items, you want to put them on like a secondary tank, but then your secondary tank dies and then the spark is gone and then you lose your effect that you want so badly. But then you want to put it on the main tank, but then your main tank now isn't as tanky. Well, what's the remedy for that? The remedy is to usually make the backline version of the item, which we'll just actually, I'll just rank it now. It's Void Staff. Void Staff's A tier. It might even be S tier, honestly. Man, do I put it in S tier? I think I want to put it in S tier. Okay. This item just gives great stats. So it's a utility item, right? It shreds, right? It shreds, so that's great. Attacks and abilities shred, which is even better. So it can work really well on units that auto attack as well. Void Staff, it gives attack speed. It gives 35 ability power, which is a good chunk of ability power. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. It's a decent chunk of change that it gives you. But then the other thing it also gives you is the mana regen. The mana regen is actually pretty massive because 1 mana regen is usually a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot. It's like 1. That doesn't sound like a lot. No, 1 is a lot in a lot of cases. I know it sounds weird. It's hard to explain, but it really helps to tie a lot of builds together. When you're looking for builds where you're trying to like get your backline unit to cast or get an ult off earlier, that 1 mana regen could often sway the fight in a lot of cases. Units like Yuumi, for example, where they have like Prodigy, they have built-in mana, they work really well with Void Staff. Void Staff actually had to get nerfed really badly. It used to give 2 mana regen, and it was the best item in the game on set launch. They nerfed it to 1. It's still pretty good, and it fits its way nicely onto builds because it gives a good flat chunk of change. The attack speed and the ability power is actually pretty good compared to a lot of the other items. So it's actually a good use of components that also serves as utility, which makes it a very efficient slam a lot of the times. Also, because you're putting on a backline unit, it's also usually surviving a lot longer. Of course, your backline unit could get sniped, but it's going to be better than putting on a tank because, you know, if the tank dies, you know, your backline unit's still going to be alive. A lot of times you can be safe, and it's usually a better idea or a better option for shred. So that's why I like it. I'll put in S tier. I think it's pretty good. Like, if I'm playing around an AP line, I'm almost always trying to make it. If I'm playing around an AP line, the tier is maybe a little bit of an issue, but I don't risk it. Like how do I phrase it? Like, if I don't get the other tier for the mana regen, then I just play towards like Prodigy or somebody who has built-in mana regen. Do you get what I'm trying to say? It's like, it feels urgent. It feels important to make almost always. And I feel very pressed to not make it. Sorry, I feel very pressed or I feel like I'm in a bad spot when I don't make it. So I want to put in S tier. Sterix. Sterix is hard for me to rank. I don't know if it's A tier or S tier, but I'm going to put in A tier. It has a lot going for it. I don't think it's as crazy as the other two items. Like, I don't think these are broken by any means. They're just really widely applicable and just great use and just, like, insane on a lot of units. Sterix is pretty nice, right? They changed Sterix effects a couple patches, like, not this set, but I think last set they reworked it and everything. And ever since they reworked it, it's been really good. It gives a big chunk of AD, so big chunk of attack damage, good amount of HP. And then it has this shielding effect where you get a bunch of shielding based on your max health. What's great about that is that it actually serves as a decent tank item if you have leftover components. A lot of times sword is hard to kill, and now Sterix is like it's like a serviceable tank item on a lot of tanks, which is what makes it in that A tier for me. Because before, like, these types of items where you look at them AD, health, and shielding, a lot of times you treat them more like melee style items, like you put them on a melee carry, which makes it a little bit more niche. And a little bit more like, you know, it has to be like an AD melee carry. However, I think this is just good on everybody. Like, there's just, like, you just make it and put on a tank unit. And it's a great use of dealing with those leftover sword components, because sword often has been really difficult to, like, turn into something meaningful if you're not playing like an AD comp in particular. But now it kind of like, you can just, like, you know, forget about the AD that it gives. You can use it as like a half decent tank item. And that's what makes it A tier to me. That's not in the B tier of just like average situational type of thing. It's like something that I feel like it's on my board a little bit more often. Dragon Claw. Now these ones I usually put in B tier as being situational. There's nothing wrong with Dragon Claw. It's just that it just gives you a lot of magic resist. It also recovers max health. There's a lot of builds that love max health recovery. Whenever you're recovering max health, Spirit Visage, it works on regenerating missing health, but it's basically the same thing, max health. At one point, if you lose enough health, you're going to recover max health as well. These are good on, like, scaling units a lot of the times, or units that just have a lot of latent HP. So, for example, like Mundo builds, if you're ever playing Mundo reroll, love these types of items because he has a passive where he's gaining maximum health. So now you're getting more and more value out of a Declaw or a Spirit Visage as the fight goes on, and the Mundo basically becomes like in those unkillable situations. So Declaw makes a lot of sense in certain builds, in certain situations. The reason I put in B tier is that it's a little bit situational. I always check to see if my lobby has predominantly AP or AD, because if you make a Declaw and your whole lobby is playing around AD, you're in a bad spot. And right now there is enough flexibility with the comps where Declaw can go either way, right? You can have a lobby where everybody's playing Ashe. What is Declaw going to do against Ashe? Absolutely fucking nothing. Like, literally, like, it's just going to get a little bit of extra HP recovery. Doesn't matter, your unit's going to die anyways, right? And what you can do is you can use those cloaks for other items. There are other really good items that like cloak, so it's kind of like a little bit awkward. Obviously, if you have infinite cloaks, you're slamming Declaw, but that's why I put in B tier. It's like in that situational tier. If you need to make it, you make it. If you have a lot of cloaks, you make it. But it's not something I look at myself and I'm like, oh, I gotta prioritize making Declaw. A lot of times with these items, I sometimes prioritize them depending on the build, or there's something that's flexible enough that I don't feel like I'm punishing myself for using the components in a non-meaningful way. And then, I'm trying to explain my thought process with the tiering, because obviously, like, a tier list, I could just say, like, everything's broken, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, it's not. Anyways, I'm a Striker's Flail enjoyer. It got nerfed. I don't know. I love this item. If you watch me ever, anything about me, my whole identity is behind this item. When this item is finally bad, you know, I think I'm gonna lose so much LP. Like, I just use this forever. Like, every build, it's just such a great item. So I'll explain why. Okay, first of all, it gives a wide variety of mixed stats, which are just great on multiple different carries. It gives attack speed. The HP doesn't usually matter, but it could matter. It makes it a little tankier. But the main thing is the attack speed. It gives critical strike chance, and it makes damage amp. So a lot of times, critical strike chance and damage amp is actually really good on an item, because if you're making towards a crit build, then Strikers works really nicely with that, because basically you're getting damage amp and then critical strike chance, making it more likely for you to get a crit. And then that also gives you a greater chance of, how do I phrase it? When you're more likely to get a crit, you have a greater chance of getting like a huge chunk of damage, but then it also scales you with damage amp. And damage amp sometimes is hard to come by. It depends on your build and what you're playing and everything, but the damage amp also scales you in a different way. So now you have crit, you have damage amp. All you really need to tie like a really heavy hitter together is a lot of base AD or AP, and you put all that together and bang, you have a complete item set. Because of that, it ties itself really often in different builds, like either AP builds or AD builds. Now, the reason why it's S tier to me as well is the use of components. Glove, outside of like certain situations, is sometimes a little bit awkward to play around, and belt, you know, besides like certain situations, a lot of times gloves and belts are things that are usually left over, and you can usually make things that are really great out of them. Or no, sorry, you can't usually make things that are great out of them, besides like your 1 or 2 items. And these are leftover components that combine together to make something really flexible and really powerful. And the flexibility is key, because you can make a striker's flail, you can slam it instantly, you can just worry about things later, and it actually like widely works with multiple different styles of builds, multiple different units. You don't even need to have a full crit build, because a lot of times you can get crit with a bonus fruit. Some of the more common ones that you often skip over is like your unit can now crit, or has crit, or augment that gives crit. All of these work amazingly with strikers as a really good item pairing, so I always put it up there. So it's like the quality of the components, being able to use those components to turn into something great, and the fact that it's super flexible and it gives a lot of stats, and I feel like in general it's overstated. I think the stats that it gives, like basically this gives like, you know, if you count the total damage amp with its bonus effect of stacking the critical strikes giving you the extra damage amp, you get like 30 damage amp with this as well, which is a good chunk of change. It is just a lot of stats. Gargoyle, I think I'm putting in the situational tier. There's not many units that I usually like Gargoyle on. Like, there's not like solo frontline style things, unless you're playing like a reroll, obviously. Like if you're playing like reroll this or reroll something else, obviously it helps to put them in the front line. The reason is that Gargoyle gives armor and MR per unit targeting the holder. So a lot of times you want multiple units to be targeting that holder, which means you want to put them kind of isolated in the front line. I say it's situational. Usually what I will do is, if I need armor and MR, the thing is that it's a little bit more flexible. This is like a way of converting like a cloak into an item that gives you armor, or a chainmail into an item that gives you magic resist. So it's really nice to just like use your components to like get some of the stats that you desire for your lobby. But in general, it's also like a little bit weak, right? Because like if you need, you'd much rather use those, like, you know, I would rather have Declaw Bramble than Gargoyle if I'm using the same components, right? So slamming it is a little bit like, it's like a B tier. It's like a solid, like, you know, middle of the pack, could make it, could be really good in certain situations, but not by any stretch like an essential or crazy thing unless you have like a solo front line. Bramble, same excuse with Declaw and Gargoyle. I actually think Bramble's maybe a little bit better because it's pretty good on early game, and the components of chainmail are actually pretty hard to deal with sometimes. Right, like for example, Cloak could turn into backline items pretty easily, right? You can make an adaptive helm, you can make a Kraken, you can make like a couple of other things, like even a QSS. Like it could turn into like damagey style of items. But Chainmail doesn't have that luxury, right? Like, what backline AP item are you making with Bramble? Exactly, fucking nothing. What AD item are you making? Like, maybe like a fucking Titans is the only damage item you can make with it, but you don't have options with it. So a lot of times Bramble, for that reason, you might see a lot of people, they'll say like Bramble is like A tier or Bramble is S tier, because it's like it's dealing with components that aren't particularly great. But the same way I spoke about Declaw, I never like to rank these super high unless number one is predominantly a meta where these things are broken, or like let me explain the best way I can. I would make it if there's a lot of people playing AD. Similar excuse as Dragonclaw, right? I don't want to talk about too much in terms of like the ranking and everything. It does give max health, it does give extra damage, I understand that, so it has some other benefits, but I would usually prioritize Bramble if I look around and everybody's playing AD, right, in my lobby, or most of the lobby is playing AD, which is why I put in B tier. I still put in that situational. You could bump it up if you're like a I hate chainmail person. I just think that even with 2 chainmails, I can often make other tank items like a crown guard or a stone plate that give me a little bit more value against some of the matchups that aren't necessarily AD. But of course, like, you know, in most cases, if you have 2 chainmails, you're just making a Bramble because it's not as polarizing as Dragon Claw, so you could add it up a tier, but I'll just keep it here for now. Giant Slayer. So Giant Slayer, this one, I don't know if this is a controversial take, and I don't want to be like super like, you know, I don't like being like the rough thing, but I always try and be honest. That's all I can do in these videos, is just say exactly what's on my mind. I think this item sucks. I try not to make it. It's kind of weird. It depends, right? The problem now is that Giant Slayer used to work where it would do a bunch of damage if other opponents have a high HP. And a lot of times towards the end of the game, when people have upgraded 5 costs, upgraded 4 costs, Giant Slayer used to get a lot of value. It was just not a good early game, because early game there wasn't enough HP to proc its effect. That was last set. This set now, they changed it. So it gives 20 AD, 15 attack speed, 20 ability power, 10 damage amp. It gives you like a good wide variety of stats, similar to like Strikers, right? You can look at it, right? It looks really stupid because I was talking all this good shit about Strikers, but now all of a sudden Giant Slayer gives you a bunch of stats and I don't like it anymore. It's mostly tied to its bonus effect. Its bonus effect gives you 15% additional damage amp against tanks. Now, it's only against tanks. What that means is when you read a unit, you'll see in the top right corner, it will say what their role is, like attack tank. The problem is a lot of units aren't tanks anymore. There are some that are tanks, like obviously like the very obvious ones like Jarvan, Cassante, but there's units like Akali, this is an assassin, Volibear, who's a fighter. I think even Braum is an attack fighter. Like, it doesn't even proc against Braum, who has a Bastion synergy. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's kind of weird. There are a lot of melee users in the set, and it kind of makes things a little bit awkward. Like, obviously it's going to work on like most the main tanks, but it just feels a little bit clumsy because there's a lot of like melee units or units that you would want to kill, or enemy carries or things like that, where it just doesn't get a good effect off. It doesn't get the extra damage amp. So for that reason, it just feels to me like a bad use of components. Like, obviously it's good if I'm trying to complete a build, and it gives base stats, right? If I need the base stats, like if I need base AD or base ability power, or I'm looking for a third damage item, it's like, it's good. It's good for tank busting, obviously, right? If I'm playing against a board that has like an insane front line that has a bunch of units that have to tank bust, Giant Slayer is going to be great. But it's very rare that I'm looking at this item and I'm saying, like, I'm going to make it over something else. Like, compare the damage amp, by the way, right? This is 25 total damage amp. Striker's Flail is 30 total damage amp. Right? Like, this literally gives you more damage amp. Obviously, this one, it gives you a little bit more attack speed and then it gives you the base stats. That's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of it is in the base stats. So, you really need to use it with a unit that needs the base stats as well. So, for that reason, I put in C tier. It's a little bit more situational, and I personally, I don't like making it that much. Next, we have Sunfire Cape. Sunfire Cape is kind of weird to rank. I don't know if I put in A tier or B tier. It's kind of hard to say. Basically, Sunfire, it's kind of like one of those like in-between items. It gives you max health. It gives you some tank stats. So, it's not that bad as a tank item, but it's not as good as some of the other tank items. But the main reason you would make it is to apply burning and wounding, right? That's anti-heal. So if your lobby has a lot of Omnivamp, if they have units that are healing a bunch, Sunfire Cape feels essential in those type of lobbies. I just don't know if I put in A tier or B tier. It's really good early game. If you can make a Sunfire on stage 2, a lot of times you have like a pretty decent ticket to like winning a couple rounds. It's pretty nice. But like, towards the end of the game, you usually prefer some of the other versions of anti-heal, where you can more easily just hit the whole board, or like, you know, have spread and survivability, similar to the argument I was making with Void Staff versus Ionic Spark. Oops, I accidentally removed Void Staff. I'll put it back. So I'm gonna put in B tier. I think it's a little bit situational. This set, I find that it like anti-heal is really good, but I feel like the other anti-heal items are a little bit better. So I'm gonna put in B tier for right now. Hand of Justice. I think this one's great. We're going to put in A tier. It gives really good Omnivamp, really good crit. And it gives some mana regen, which we already talked about being really good on a lot of units. And then it either gives you like a bunch of ability power and attack damage, which helps you, just gives you like a good chunk of damage. Or it gives you like extra Omnivamp based on your HP threshold. It's really good at completing builds. You can go for crit melee builds with it really nicely. But it also works as a much better version of some of the other options for Omnivamp, which is really nice as well. Omnivamp is kind of a little bit weird, by the way, now. I'll talk about it when we get to Bloodthirster, because Bloodthirster is pretty shit right now. But when you think about your users, right, a lot of the users that are either assassins or fighters, they have built-in omnivamp based on their attack fighter trait. So they just come out the market with some extra omnivamp built in already. For that reason, a lot of times you either don't build omnivamp, you're going for full damage, or you're building something like Hand of Justice, which gives you some stats as well. In the past, it was always like a choice. Like Hand of Justice, it was like kind of less for healing, it was more for like making these like damagey builds. Now that like I said, you get like the mana regen, you get the critical strike chance, and you have built-in omnivamp, a lot of times you're better off making a Hand of Justice if that's like your survivability item that you want to make. Edge Knight I think is S tier, by the way. There's a lot of backline access this set. There's a lot of times where you're playing the game and your backline is just dead in the water. So Edge Knight, obviously it's a really good survivability item for frontline. It gives a good chunk of stats, right? It gives some attack damage, some attack speed, some ability power. But the main thing is the second effect, the lifeline. At 60% health, you become intargetable and you shed negative effects. I find that this item is just a great use. Sword and chainmail sometimes are awkward to use. I feel like there's a lot of units that love to have it. Obviously, you have your melee units that you want to have it just for survivability. Think like a Volibear. It would be great on him. Just make sure he doesn't die. Even other melee units like a Yone even, just make sure he doesn't die. But then you can also think about units that are like, frontline adjacent. A Gwen. You love Edge Knight on Gwen because she's like right next to the front line. A lot of times she can die randomly. You want to keep her alive. It's one of her best items. Just make sure that she's alive as well. But then you also have backline units that can use it because a lot of times you can get easily sniped by just random stray bullets. There's so many stray things that can hit you, like AoE spread from Sorks, Malzahar, right? This unit hits the backline. This unit can jump on your backline. This guy can jump on your backline. This unit hits AoE. This unit can snipe your backline. Like, who else? Like, literally everybody. This guy can jump on your backline. This guy hits randomly. 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 This guy can jump, like, he doesn't jump your backline. This guy could also, depending on which type of Lee Sin you have, can hit your backline. This can hit your backline. Like, everybody can hit your backline. I'm not even exaggerating. This guy can hit your backline. Like, do I have to go more? Do you want me to go through more? This guy can hit your back. Like, what the fuck, man? Like, look at this shit. I'm not even, I was just, like, meandering around. There's so many units that can kill your backline. This item is, you never feel bad making this item. Genuinely. Like, I make this item and I know it's like, I don't need it. I could just position. It's like, no. It's like this, like, actually. Like, it saves so many games. You could earn so much LP by just making an Edge Knight. Like, actually, it's so absurd. There's so much backline access. It's crazy. Like, half the time you're just losing because, and then don't even get me started about Unstoppable. Like, what if somebody has Unstoppable and then they hit your backline with, oh my. Like, it has to be S tier, right? Like maybe that's a bit of, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. Like, obviously, like I'm hamming it up to make the video entertaining because obviously you're just listening to me yap for like an hour probably. But it's just a great item. You can almost never go wrong. If you're left over with a chainmail and you don't know what to do with it, I bet just make an Edge Knight. You can often win a fight just based on this alone. So just keep it in the back of your head. It's pretty alright. Titans I think is C tier. They made it so it has an anti-stun now, but Titans is always like a little bit weird because it doesn't give you that good. It's not that powerful of an item, I find, right? It gives you some armor, gives you some attack speed. It stacks you with attack damage and ability power, so it could work really well, right? You can get a bunch of stats from it, but you need to be able to use those stats, and you also have to be able to like get the Titans ramped up to like a certain point. So it's a little bit situational, and then you also at one point get immunity to crowd control, but it's not instant immunity, which makes it feel a little bit worse. A lot of the units that you make Titans on, they're kind of like, it's kind of like in between if you want to make it or not, because it doesn't help that much with the damage. Titans was more of a drain tank item. What do I mean by that? In the past, you would make a unit, like let's take Volibear for example. You would basically just want to get hit a bunch, and you would go for a build. This is like not this set Volibear. I want to make it very clear. This is like a Volibear from like 2 sets ago. Like there was a reroll Volibear line, and the build that you would go is like something like this, like double Titans BT. And the idea was that when a bunch of other units hit you, you would generate mana. So these would ramp up, you'd get more and more armor, you get more and more stats, but then you would also generate mana, which would make you cast a bunch. You no longer generate mana from getting hit. That's something they removed from the game. And because of that, I feel like Titans feels a lot worse, because you don't usually want to go for a drain tank build anymore, because you're not going to get all those crazy ults off, like repeatedly chain casting because you're absorbing a lot of damage. Instead, you're just making a really tanky unit that you gotta hope scales well off both AD and AP to get like good juicy value off Titans, right? Like, I think of Titans, I think of a unit that it would be good on is somebody like Yone. Yone attacks a lot, attacks really fast, he has ramping attack speed. You put a Titans on Yone, now you have easy CC immunity, and he scales with both the AD and the AP, right? Obviously, it has its use cases. It's going to be good on certain units. However, I don't want to make it on most units, so that's why I put in C tier. It's like in that tier of like, if I have to make it, I'll make it, or if I'm playing a very particular situation where it's obviously going to work out for that unit, I'll make it, but it's nowhere near a priority, and it's nowhere near like the average item that I make. It's not like I'm scouting my lobby and I'm saying, Titans might be good here. It's like, you know, it's more so like, oh, I have a unit that Titans might be okay on, I guess I'll make Titans instead of making other items that are probably better, right? Like, if I had to choose, if I have a bow and a chainmail, I might even sit and try and make a better bow item and an edge of night. You know what I mean? It's like in that type of tier where it's like, I really have to justify it, which I don't have. Krakens is A tier. This shit ramps up so much damage. Basically, you get 3 AD per ramping auto attack. Sorry, for every attack you do, you get 3 stacking attack damage. It's the critical item for a lot of stall comps that are playing around AD. So it actually works out to be pretty well. I think it's like a solid A tier, and you can actually build towards multiple lines with it. Lots of units, especially now that they changed Volibear as well, it actually falls in really nicely with a lot of the AD lines. Even if it's not something that you really like, it's still like an attack speed giving item that gives you some attack damage that you can then scale in other ways. Of course, if you have a lot of base AD already, it's not going to be as impactful, but it just has a really good setup in the landscape of the game that I think it's worthwhile to put it on the A tier. Bloodthirster, I think, is D tier. Basically, Bloodthirster used to be like the Giga Omnivamp item, and it used to give you like a little bit of a health shield. The problem is now that most units have built-in Omnivamp because of the changes they made to the archetypes. Now, obviously, they might change Bloodthirster to maybe give a little bit more stats. Maybe it'll be broken next patch. Who knows, right? Who knows? But right now, like, besides, like, maybe Silvermere Dawn Jace that you just want to heal forever, like, I'm pretty much never making a Bloodthirster. Like, it's very rare that I commit these items to a Bloodthirster. I'd rather make, like, an IE. A lot of times you don't even make Omnivamp on units anymore, right? Like a lot of Volibear builds, you literally just don't make any Omnivamp. You go triple damage items because you just want, you're either killing the unit or you're dead. Like, you know, you don't, there's not a lot. Part of it is also the drain tanking, right? The thing I talked about before where it's like, you know, you absorb a lot of damage and live forever, like part of that's also gone. Bloodthirster, obviously, it's something you can make sometimes. Like I said, like Silvermere Dawn Jace, it's obviously like really good. It's one of his best items because he just lives forever and he does infinite damage. So you just want like the insane Omnivamp because of how much damage he's gonna do. He heals back to full instantly, right? Like that's like, it's obviously good there. But like a lot of the other units, it's like, you know, I'm only making it if those are my leftover components, right? Like if I'm really stuck and I need to make it like as a tank item, right? You have a similar thing. It's like a shitty version of Sterix, right? Because you don't get the HP. Like, you can get a little bit of a health shield so you can use as a tank item. But it's somewhere in this tier. I think it's actually like one of the worst items. So I'm going to put it all the way down here, like in the rarely made. Archangels, I'm going to put in A tier. Archangels is kind of weird. Sometimes I put it in like A tier, sometimes I put in B tier, sometimes I put in C tier. This set, I feel like there's a lot of lines that love to have ramping AD. Like, think your Yumi lines, think your Kog'Maw lines. Even there was like a Kali for a while that loved to have it, and then she got nerfed to the ground, but I'm sure like when she gets readjusted or things get adjusted, it'll still be okay on her as well. I think that there's a lot of lines that love to have the ramping base stats, and base stats also go a long way because you can get crit pretty easily from the bonus fruits. Before, Archangel was taking up a spot and it was kind of like, I'm gonna make scaling damage, and really it would only work out if you had like an insane front line. Now you can have both the scaling of Archangels, and a lot of times you can actually get your bonus fruits to complete things this set, which gives you like heavy burst damage as well. So it works out nicely. The other thing about Archangels that's great is that now it gives mana regen. So for a lot of units, it can also help them to cast a little bit more frequently, right? You can often pair an Archangels with a Void Staff with another item, and you have as much mana gen as like a normal mana gen item. So it's actually pretty crazy. So just keep that in mind. So it's definitely like up there. It's definitely like a little bit above like the averaged for me. Next we have Shojin. Shojin's hard to rank. I think it's like the go-to mana gen item, so I think I'm gonna put in S tier. Basically the only units that you don't want to make a Shojin for are what's it called, like Yumi, like prodigy units. Basically Shojin is mostly a utility item. Attacks grant 5 bonus mana. It's not the most crazy item in the game, but actually, you know what, maybe I'll put it here. I don't know, I really like these items more than Shojin. Shojin's kind of weird, right? Shojin's basically essential on some units because it helps you to cast. But also, it's never really like optimal because it's kind of like, like it doesn't do a lot. It doesn't give you a lot. It gives you the mana gen, which is great, and it grants 5 bonus mana, but it's mostly an item to help you to cast a punch. It's not an item that's to me is broken. It's more of an item that's made out of necessity, excuse me. So if you want to rank it in S tier for necessity, it is essential. It's necessary. Your units will not function correctly. Like for example, if you have a Karma, right, and you don't have a Shojin, like good fucking luck, you know what I mean? If you have like some other units that need a Shojin and they don't have a Shojin, it's like good luck, you know what I mean? So, but it's like at the same time, it's like sometimes you just want triple damage, right? And you can just get your mana gen from some other items and call it a day maybe, but it's like it's risky. So if you think that it's super essential, you can put in S tier. I won't care. I completely agree. I'm on the fence. I'm gonna put in A tier because I think these items are just like cooler, right? Like you know, unless I'm committed towards like a Sork style comp, I'm often making these items first, and then if I get another tier, I'll lean towards Sorks. If not, I'll play like Prodigy or something else where I don't need a Shojin. So that's what I mean. It's kind of somewhere here. But also could work well on AD and AP, so keep that in mind. But a lot of the AD units don't really like Shojin that much. They'd rather just have like 3 damage items. Even Shroud, we had the reasoning with Ionic Spark. Similar reasoning here. A way of doing Shred / Thunder, but it's not that great because it's like on a front line. It's not that good of a tank item in general. So we put in B tier. Nashers, I think this item's fucking useless. I'm gonna put in D tier. Now this item's kind of weird. It gives 2 mana gen, and I would think that it's really good for giving 2 mana gen, but it just doesn't do that much. Like it doesn't give that much attack speed. It doesn't give that much ability power, right? It gives okay ability power, but it doesn't give that much. And then the 30% attack speed that you get after casting, a lot of times, if you're trying to go for a chain cast build, Nashers used to be the way to go. But because they changed the way Gwinsu operates, now whenever you're going for a chain casting build, you actually just build Gwinsu because you get way more value off the attack speed getting every second with the Gwinsu. This like outscales Nashers like very, very fast actually, right? 7 attack speed every second, you know, after 4 seconds, it's already going to be like in the tier 5 seconds. It's already better than Nashers in a lot of cases, right? Like not exactly, like obviously Nashers are a little bit better until then because it still gives like the starting and the other stuff, but it has like, this is like unconditional and it continues to scale for the fight. And the thing is, usually with a scaling item, you care about how fast it scales. Gwinsu scales fast enough that it kind of outclasses Nashers. Now Nashers does give the mana gen. This is the part that confuses me a bit because mana gen is usually really good. And I see 2 mana gen, and I'm thinking like 2 mana gen with 25 AP and attack speed, like it seems like it would be alright, but it just takes up too much of a slot, right? Even some of the other items I was talking about, right? I was saying Void Staff is really good and it only has 1 mana regen, but it gives more attack speed and more ability power. Like that's the problem, right? So it's like, and it also shreds, so it has like an effect that's really powerful and really important to the comp that you're playing, right? Archangels, that's it. If you're building it to scale infinitely, it scales you infinitely. The problem with this is that even though it gives 2 mana gen, the rest of the stats are kind of like and it just doesn't fit into any builds really. You'd rather just use those items to do something else most of the time. Morello and Red Buff, I'll both put in A tier. I think these are the go-to options for making anti-heal now. Red Buff gives a big chunk of attack speed, but usually you're making it for anti-heal. Also, 2 bows, if you're not playing like an attack speed heavy comp, could be hard to deal with, so actually is an okay use of components there. And then Morello I think is just like really good, right? It gives mana gen, it gives ability power, and it has anti-heal. Now it's not as crazy in terms of its stats as some of the other items, but it's definitely like A tier. I think if you're playing any sort of AP line that wants to make anti-heal, you can't go wrong with Morello. Crown Guard I think is somewhere in B tier. It's just like a solid tank item that works well on some units. Maybe not broken, but like pretty good. I'm not sure if it's like much better than B tier, so I'll just leave it there. Adaptive Helm is kind of weird. I don't know what it is about it. It's pretty alright. I don't know if it's A tier. I kind of like it in B tier, but it could very well be A tier. Okay, so can we just like, it's hard to say. It's here or here, right? It's here or here. The thing with Adaptive Helm is it's decent because it's flexible, right? It has good front line, right? Tanks and fighters, you'll get 35 armor and magic resist. And then other roles, you gain attack damage and ability power. The problem is like tanks and fighters, it's like sometimes the fighters, you want to give them the stats, which is kind of weird. But it gives like good base stats in general, and it gives 2 mana regen, which is pretty nice for if you're putting this on like a unit that likes to cast a bunch. It also gives additional mana from all sources, which has some synergies. It's just like a little bit awkward. I feel like it's a little bit clumsy. Because with the tier and the cloak, sometimes you want to make other items. But I'm willing to put in A tier. I'll put in B tier. I'll put in B tier because I'm unsure. It could very well be A tier. It's just that every time I make this item, I feel like it's not tanky enough for my tanks. And I feel like on a backline unit, it's pretty shit. That's my problem. So like from my own experiences, I have to trust my gut and just say that it's like around the same level as these items, which I think isn't even that bad. Because my B tier isn't like bad items. My B tier is like situational items. So I think that's fine, like to put adaptive and situational. A tier is like good items I'm making often. These are like usually items I either have on my carries or on my tanks, like most of the time. And then S tier is just like a little bit higher. Maybe Spirit Visage can go down actually, but I kind of like it up there, so we'll leave it there. Blue buff I think is the same tier as these items. It's kind of just a little bit outclassed right now, if I'm being honest. The thing with blue buff is that it just gets mogged by Shojin. So blue buff gives 5 mana regen. That seems insane. Obviously, it seems really good. It's probably good on good units. Then you also have Shojin, right? Shojin gives 1 mana regen and attacks grant 5 bonus mana. So usually the breakdown that I would have for why you would make blue buff versus Shojin is that blue buff doesn't worry about your attack speed. Shojin, if you are attacking once per second, then you are gaining the 5 bonus mana and you're basically at the equivalent of blue buff. However, if you have blue buff, you know, if you have really low attack speed, the 5 mana regen is gonna help you out more because you're not you know what I mean? Like if you're not attacking once per second, then blue buff is gonna give you more mana over time. The problem is that doesn't take into account the fact that Shojin also gives you 1 mana regen. So I think between the 1 mana regen, most units just like Spear of Shojin, right? Even units that have low attack speed, like lower than 1 attack speed, in the stats, they like Shojin better than blue buff. It might be an item economy thing, because using 2 tiers is really committable, right? If I'm making a unit, like let's say I'm playing Karma, right? Karma doesn't have 1.0 attack speed, right? So blue buff should be better than her. Like if I had to predict, like just based on numbies of how often she's gonna cast, I would say that blue buff she's gonna cast faster in some cases, right? Because like on paper, like if you look at her base stats, she has less than 1.0 attack speed, unless I'm building attack speed items on her. Also, I don't know why it's not showing the Shojin on the Karma, because it's kind of annoying me. Okay, whatever, it is what it is. That's a Shojin. The problem is that if you make a blue buff, you kind of lock yourself out because you're using 2 tiers and making a lot of the other good tier items. And I think that's what the stats kind of reflects, right? Because like I could easily, like, bro, what is going on? Wait, hold. Well, what I was trying to say is this, right? It's not working the website, but you can make Shojin and then Void Staff as 2 items on your carry by splitting up your tiers to make 2 different items, and they each give a mana regen, which actually works out. If you have like Shojin this, you're gonna cast faster than blue buff almost always, right? So it's like I think that's what the problem with blue buff is. It's that like a lot of units that have enough attack speed would just prefer Shojin, And then the other problem is that it doesn't give like anything extra. It doesn't give any extra sauce. So it's pretty much just like a debate between Shojin and blue buff. But Shojin allows you to kill a sword, which is really good in a lot of comps. And also gives you another tier to play around that if you're making blue buff, it's like much less common. Of course, if you have 2 tiers, you can make blue buff. It's probably fine. But it's in that tier. Last Whisper, I think, is A tier. I think it's just the better Sundering item, so I'm going to put it up 1. This one, it gives like a good chunk of attack damage and attack speed, but not that much, right? If you compare Last Whisper to something like Void Staff definitely looks overstated, right? When Void Staff first launched, it got like a big buff, and then Last Whisper didn't. But Last Whisper does work with crit builds really well. That's the only reason I'm not putting it up there with Void Staff. I think Void Staff in its respective area is a little bit better of an item. Jewel Gauntlet, similar to IE, just crit, but for AP units, I'm going to put it in that Infinity Edge category. Fun fact, Jewel Gauntlet, if you read it, gives 35 ability power. Void Staff also gives 35 ability power. So, like, if we're, like, comparing, this is what I was trying to say before, right, that Void Staff gives a lot of stats, like, you know, you can disagree with me if it's S tier or not. Like, you can say it's, like, fucking A tier or B tier, but I'm telling you, this item is pretty fucking good, right? It's like, I don't know what to tell you. It's pretty good. I'm just saying. Steadfast, I put in B tier. It's like in those items where I make it if I have good combos. And it could give you like a good amount of stats if you need it. So, you know, B tier for sure. Frying Pan shouldn't be here. I don't know why it's here. QSS is kind of weird. I'd put in B tier, I think. I think it's like pretty solid. It's like if you want anti-stun or you want to have stun immunity, it's good. But it's also like a little bit weird of an item because it just gives you a lot of attack speed. So you really want to put on a unit that loves attack speed. There's not many melee units that really love QSS in their build right now. And a lot of backline units, you'd rather just have like a ramping attack speed more so than the QSS. But situational, right? You can make it to just like, you know, optimize your board as well. Deathblade, same reason as Rabadon's. It's not a common item. It's definitely a high roll item. It's not something I'm making all the time. But it gives so much stats that it's often like really powerful on a lot of the units that you would make it for. So I think it's fine to put in A tier. Warmogs, I actually really like Warmogs. I think it's a great tank item, and I think it's really applicable on a lot of units. I think it also works really well in terms of just like using belt items, which sometimes can be a little bit awkward to play around. So I'm going to put in A tier. And now finally we have our last item, Hextech Gunblade. I don't know if it goes here or here. I think there's very few units that like Gunblade. I find that I'm not making it that often. But I'll put it in B tier because I don't think the item's that bad. It also gives mana regen, which is pretty good. But it's just the bonus effect of it is kind of like a little bit awkward to deal with. So I'll put in B tier. I'm not making it that often, but it could help out in a lot of builds. Anyways, this is my tier list. I'm pretty happy with it. These are the items I would think in my head I just like to have on my board, and I feel like a lot of the times I'm winning games, I have these type of items. These are all like the common like carry slash regular items, and then of course situational tier, B tier. This is like the average. Obviously if I put something in B tier, it doesn't mean don't make it, and I put something in A tier, it means make it all the time. Obviously you have to have a mixture of B tier items. It's just that like which B tier you pick, especially with the tank items, right? Gargoyle, Declaw, Bramble, you have to make some sort of armor and MR item on your tank. I'm not saying don't make any armor and MR type item on your tank. What I'm saying is that like something like Warmogs, it's good against everybody because it gives you HP. But these ones are situational. If your lobby is AD, you make this. If your lobby is AP, you make this. If you can, you make both, right? Obviously, you have to make these items. Even with the utility items, if you can't make the backline utility, you have to make your frontline utility. These are just like the ones where you have to think about it. And they're more situational. These are the ones that are like obvious, right? It's like, oh, I'm playing around like a Yuumi, I have to make Archangels. Oh, I'm playing around an Ashe, I have to make Winsu. Oh, I have like a bunch of rods. Rabadons can't hurt, it's a really good item. And then these ones are the ones that are like no-brainers to me. It's like, oh yeah, I can make an Edge of Night, I'll probably make an Edge of Night here. It's probably a good idea. And then these ones, I think they're just outclassed. They'll probably get buffed or adjusted in some way. Nashers might turn into like a broken item. I think if it just gets tweaked a little bit, this can easily like make it onto a lot of comp builds. But it feels like it just takes up space in like ways that you can generate similar value or better value with other items. But anyways, thanks for watching. hopefully that was informative. I tried to explain thought process along the way, so it's not just like these are the items, slam these to win. It's more so like me like explaining what makes the item relevant when I'm looking at the game. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully the discussion was worthwhile. Have a great day and see ya. Bye bye.